We first released the Titanic Museum tour in January of 2023. Since then, we've had so many people tell us how much they enjoyed the tour and can't wait to come to Pigeon Forge to go to this museum in person. In the original video, I mentioned how I had to actually trim down the video to keep it under 1 hour. We've had a number of comments asking if we could actually release a longer version, and that is what you're about to watch. So we hope you enjoy this extended version with more stories and details. Without further ado, let the adventure begin. Welcome to the Titanic in Pigeon Forge. My name is Ryan, and on our channel, we check out things to do in the Great Smoky Mountains and beyond. Today, we're gonna go inside. We got special permission to do some filming, and we're gonna show you what it's like on the inside, how much it costs, and help you decide if this is something you wanna do next time you come to Pigeon Forge. There are some things inside I can't show you, like some of the actual artifacts that were on the Titanic. I'm gonna show you some highlights of what it's like inside with Katie, and I'm gonna introduce you to someone who went down to the Titanic and actually let us hold one of the artifacts. So without further ado, let the adventure begin. We're gonna go inside, give you a full tour of this museum and give you lots of details, but I did want to show you the parking lot, which is free to park in here in Pigeon Forge. As we pass by the anchor, you can see some Christmas decorations on the hat here. And what we're gonna do is, I'm gonna explain to you how tickets work. This is the one place we would definitely recommend to get them online in advance. But if you don't have them in advance, you can come wait in this line like these people are here and see if you can get to one of these touchscreen kiosks where you are able to come and purchase tickets. Now there are certain boarding times throughout the day, so you could click on general admission and see what times are available. You can see here 1:30 to 2:30 is available, so I could click on it to purchase an adult ticket, which at the time of recording this video comes out to $35, or a child ticket 5 to 12 comes out to $15. Children 4 and under are free. But before we go in and do a full tour, I did want to chat with Jody, one of the first Titanic employees, about discounts that are available and some other tips.
Well, our museum here in Pigeon Forge has been here for 12 years. Our sister ship in Branson, Missouri has been open for 16 years. Most days we are sold out, especially September, October, November, December. We have a lot of not only bus tours, but we do have school groups between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So reservations are pretty much required. So just call our 800 number or go on our website to book reservations. If you are a homeschool parent, please call our 800 number. We do have discounts for homeschool families. We have veterans discounts. We have teacher discounts. We have a lot of discounts for groups and different military, homeschool teachers, things like that. Slower times, like during the winter, January, February, we're open to 9 to 5, 9 to 6. The busier hours, we can be open all the way till 10 o'clock. We are selling out 3, 4, 5 hours in advance. Today, we opened up sold out until noon because we had so many bus tours.
Well, thank you so much, Jody. We're gonna go hop on the tour and check this out.
Have fun. Bye, Titaniacs.
All right, thank you. You do get audio devices on this tour. We are going to be tagging along with one of the many tour guides scattered throughout the museum. You'll be handed one of these audio devices once you walk through the line area over here, get your photo taken, and you'll be ready to head inside.
So I have some boarding passes for you all. These all hold the names and stories of real life passengers and crew members that were aboard the ship. Throughout your tour today, you're going to learn more about them. You might find something that once belonged to them. You might see a photo of them, and at the very end is when you're going to discover whether or not they survived. So for you today, sir, I have Alfred Norney.
All right.
Who was on board as the Baron von Droxen. He found the name off a newspaper. And for you, we'll give you Master William Carter, one of the richest little boys on board the ship today. Oh yeah, your family was the one that owned the car on board. So you had a nice new car that you were about to bring in to America. All right, are you ready to enter?
Yeah, let's do it.
Right this way.
All right, here we go.
Right behind you. And there is a boarding pass for you, the richest woman on board the ship today. So welcome aboard, ma'am. Thank you. So this is our main lobby area. All the flags around it, these represent the 40 nations that were aboard Titanic. Now we did pull out 3 very specific ones that are right in the middle: the American flag, the Union Jack from the UK, and the Irish flag. The American flag is because, well, Titanic was a British ran ship. She was American owned. An American financier by the name of J.P. Morgan actually was the one who paid for her to be built. Of course, the Union Jack from the UK because it was a British-owned ship. And the Irish flag is in honor of the 14,000 Irishmen it took to build Titanic in Belfast, Ireland. So this is our very first room. We call it our model or our map room. Now, the number one thing I like to point out in this room is that everything that is behind glass is an actual artifact. We have about over 300 inside the museum, spread out between 20 galleries. Now, this map over here does depict Titanic's maiden voyage. She started all the way over in Belfast, Ireland, hopping over the English Channel to Cherbourg, France, before continuing on to Queenstown, Ireland. Now, in Queenstown, Titanic actually had to dock 2 miles away from the shoreline. The ports there were a little bit too small for a ship of her size, so they ended up tendering back and forth passengers from the shore to the ship. But Queenstown is where she would lift her anchor for the final time as she started on her main journey to New York City. So those first 3 days, it was very smooth, very uneventful sailing, until, of course, Sunday, April 14th, at 11:40 p.m. when our lookout Frederick Fleet declared iceberg right ahead. Now Titanic and her crew, they only had 37 seconds to try and dodge the iceberg. Unfortunately, for a ship of her size, they couldn't turn quick enough. They did hit at 2:20 a.m. the next morning. Just 2 hours and 40 minutes later, Titanic was gone. Now there was another ship nearby called the Carpathia. They were traveling from New York City to the Mediterranean Sea. They heard Titanic's distress calls, rerouted, and went as quickly as possible towards her last known location. But it would take the Carpathia 4 hours to actually reach Titanic. Once they arrived, it would take another 4.5 hours to pick up all the survivors. Once everyone who could be saved was on board the Carpathia, they had to make the choice: were they going to continue on to the Mediterranean with their passengers and the Titanic survivors, or would they turn around and take everyone back to New York City? They chose the latter option, turning around, taking everyone straight back to New York City, but that would be just another 3 days of traveling. It did take 3 years for Titanic to be built in Belfast, Ireland, and only 5 days for her to reach the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. Out of the 2,208 passengers and crew members that were aboard the ship, only 712 would make it to New York City. Now, being here today, you not only honor myself and my crew members, but you also honor the names, the women and the children that were on your boarding passes. As I said, these hold the names and stories of real-life passengers and crew members, and by holding that boarding pass, you are helping us continue to tell those stories. Now we'll head on into the drawing room over here, traveling a little bit further back in time to see how Titanic was built. So you see some of the blueprints, some of the artists' renderings of what the Titanic would have looked like in its final form compared to photos of it when it was built. Some of the things they chose to make different. For instance, one of my favorites is the rendering of the first class dining salon, and how they changed to add some extra space is that they built the tables around the column so they still have more room to fit more people. Gotcha. That's one of my favorite little things to point out. Now in this room, this is where I always like to introduce 2 very important men to Titanic's story. So over here, this is Thomas Andrews, our chief engineer. He started working at the Harland & Wolff Shipyard at the age of 16 as an apprentice. He worked his way up through the company before he became a chief designer. Titanic was one of the very first ships he actually designed, Olympic being the first. Now, he was on board the Olympic on its maiden voyage, taking notes to see what he can improve on when he designed his next ship. And he was going to do the exact same thing on Titanic, so he was traveling as a first-class passenger on her maiden voyage. Now, Titanic was his life's work. On the night of the sinking, he was last seen taking doors off their hinges and throwing them overboard, taking the deck chairs off and throwing them overboard because he knew the ship was going to go down and not everyone was going to get into a lifeboat. So he was basically tearing apart his life's work that night to save other lives. He unfortunately does go down with the ship, leaving behind his wife and a 2-year-old daughter home. Then, of course, our good old Captain Edward John Smith over here on this wall. He had actually come out of retirement to go on board the Titanic. He had been traveling for about 62 years as a captain. Now he took his dog, Ben, that's pictured with him on every single ship he ever went on. And while most people know that, like any good naval captain, Smith does go down with the ship, the number one question we always get asked is, does Ben survive? Ben does survive the sinking of Titanic because he was actually never on board. When his daughter Helen found out that he was going to come out of retirement to go on Titanic, she was very upset. Not only would he be missing Easter, he would be missing her birthday. So he left Ben at home with his daughter to make it up to her. So thankfully she at least had a little part of him to hold on to when she found out her father did not survive the sinking. Now this is our shipyard. On these 3 walls here, these are photos of the gantries where Titanic and her sister ship Olympic were built. You can just see how much larger some of the machinery was compared to the men working on the ships. My favorite photo is this one because you can see how much taller the gantries actually were compared to the city of Belfast, Ireland. Now in 1912, Ireland was a very, very poor nation, so a lot of families were actually shipping their kids off to America to save money and send it back home. But during the building of Titanic and Olympic, Harland and Wolff Shipyard became the largest private employer in Ireland because they had hired 14,000 Irishmen to build the 2 ships. So this is actually a photo of all those men walking home. Now in the center at the beginning of this room, this is our first case full of some china and silver from the RMS Titanic. We do have a lot of china and silver on display. That is mainly because Titanic was never filled to capacity. She could carry about 3,250 people on board. On her maiden voyage, she was traveling with 2,208. So they only took out as much china and silver as they were going to need to use for the maiden voyage. A lot of it was still left in the packing crates that came on board with. When the ship was sinking and it split in half, those packing crates washed out to the ocean and were found floating, with everything still safely packed away inside. This is Grape's Pub. If you've seen the 1997 James Cameron movie, you probably recognize it. This is a real pub that still stands today in Southampton, England. That's where a lot of passengers and crew members had their final drink before they boarded the ship. But what James Cameron did, this is where he put Jack to win his ticket in a game of poker, was Grape's Pub. Which might sound very fantastical, but was actually based off a true story. A first-class passenger by the name of George Brereton, he was a card shark, or what we would think of today as a con man. He won his first-class ticket in a hand of poker. What James Cameron ended up doing, so he wasn't getting in trouble from the family members of Titanic passengers, is that he took different stories that he liked and built them into Jack and Rose. So if he got it wrong, families couldn't get too upset with him because they were still fictional characters, but he was just using the stories for inspiration. So that was one of them. So we have some pieces of the aft grand staircase here on board. So there were actually 2 grand staircases on board the ship. The one that most people think of is the forward grand, which would be the one that's between the 1st and 2nd smokestack. The aft was between the 3rd and 4th. Okay. The reason we know these are from the aft grand staircase is because on the back you can still kind of see the lead from where they wrote aft, so they knew where they was going to be going on the ship.
Oh, wow.
This is also why you might not recognize the designs when we get to our grand staircase.
Sure.
Because ours is the forward, this is the aft.
So all these pieces, I know you said the dishes were in the crates that floated. Yes. What about pieces
this
like
was
this?
also picked up. Where Titanic sank was a major waterway.
Okay.
So a lot of ships had to go pass through that area, so they had all these other ships come out to clean it up and recover anything before other ships could pass.
Okay.
So kind of like on the interstate today, if there's a wreck, you have to sit in traffic as they clear it out.
Right.
These people had to come out. This is actually one of the officers of the Mackie Bennett. He was the one who actually recovered this piece.
Okay.
They had it framed and everything.
Wow.
because there's pieces that they had to pick up out of the water before other ships could pass.
Pieces of history.
This case holds my favorite piece of china. It's that little crescent moon plate.
Oh.
I was a very picky eater as a kid. I didn't like my food touching. And it would have come really in handy if I had a little side dish like that.
Right.
Titanic was kind of using old technology. This is a bed warmer.
Okay.
What they would have done is filled it with boiling hot water, and you'd iron out your sheets and blankets, and then you'd wrap it up and put it at the foot of your bed. And it has this triangle shape because as your feet relax, it relaxed against it. The reason it's old technology is because the first electric blanket was actually patented the same exact year. This is just a model that was made up to show you kind of how the Titanic would have looked. It also explains some of the different areas on board the ship. Every child's favorite one, of course, is the poop deck, which is actually just a shortened version of a Latin term for poopus deck.
Okay.
This means the high deck at the stern of the ship.
Okay. Not where they took the dogs.
Not where they took the dogs. Now, this is also very fun because this is the easiest way to show you that between this first and second smokestack, that little window on the very top, that would be the grand staircase, the forward grand. And this one over here would be the aft grand staircase. It was a little bit lower. It only went down about 4 decks. Well, this one went down 6 decks.
So this is, would you say, the same design that cruise ships still kind of use today, having the two?
This is also a fun one to show because Titanic has 4 funnels. That was the aesthetic at the time, but only the first 3 actually worked.
Okay.
The 4th funnel is what we would call a dummy stack. So if you ever see an artist rendition of Titanic and you see smoke coming out of the 4th stack, you know they didn't do their research.
Right.
Because this is only ever converted into a ventilation shaft for the kitchen.
Okay.
So the only thing ever should be coming out of that would hopefully be like really good smelling
Smells,
food.
yes.
But they were just going to leave it as 3 stacks, but because of the aesthetic at the time, they built a 4th one just to go with how people wanted ships to look.
Good feng shui, right?
Good feng shui. Let's see if you can do it. I'll say it's actually heavy. we put it to wait for you.
Oh, there
we go. Now the real trick is, can you do it for 10 hours a day? So this is an actual size of what a boiler would have looked like. They actually said 16 feet diameter, so this is half that size. Now we had men working 10-hour shifts a day, shoveling anywhere between 600 to 640 tons of coal.
Wow.
Now believe it or not, the men down in the boiler room actually have one of the highest survival rates amongst the male crew members on board. The Titanic hit right where they were working, so they saw how bad the damage was firsthand, and they raced up to save themselves.
Okay.
They were actually chosen because you had to have at least 7 crew members to man a lifeboat. Unfortunately, you couldn't go to a first-class passenger and be like, hey, you've never lifted a finger in your life, but you need to start rowing this boat.
Right.
Can't go to that. So you had at least 7 crew members to row a lifeboat at once.
Okay.
The easiest way to think about it is, do you want a steward who delivers tea to you rowing a lifeboat?
Right.
Or the men who shovel 640 tons of coal a day rowing a lifeboat?
Who have the muscles.
They have the muscle power. You're going to do it again?
All right, Micah. You can be on our lifeboat.
You got 8.5 more hours to go. No. One of our favorite fire stokers on board, his name was John Podesta. And he actually saw the Titanic hit the iceberg. He was supposed to be on duty, but he was taking an unsolicited smoke break. So he saw the impact happen. He got onto a lifeboat. On board the Carpathia, the rescue ship, he wanted to send his mother home a telegram to let her know that he was okay. But the workers on Carpathia, of course, were being overrun by all the survivors wanting to send their families notes back home. So when it came to his turn, he decided that he was going to get very short, very sweet. And all he sent to her was 4 letters, and he signed his name.
Okay.
The 4 letters he chose to send were S-A-F-E.
Okay.
And that's all she needed to know that he had survived.
Yep.
And we actually have his telegram right here that he sent home to his mom.
Yep.
This is a photo of what he would have looked like while working on board the Titanic, and a photo of him later on in life with his second wife.
Okay.
We have a crew member who plays him. He's like, that's his second wife. You need to make sure everyone knows that he was the ladies' man. I went, all right.
He looks like it.
He was also a giant prankster, apparently.
Yeah.
He just
kind of has that smirk on his face, you know.
There's actually a story of him that inspired one of Jack's stories too.
Okay.
Because he was at Graves Pub having a final drink, and he almost missed the boat.
Okay.
So when Jack and Fabrizio have to jump from the
Yes.
walkways over the water onto the boat, he had to do the exact same thing to get on board.
Really? Wow.
You want to try it? This is a question. How many female crew members are on board Titanic? 121, 8 or 23 female crew members.
I would have thought there'd been more.
It was
females.
actually still really uncommon. People still thought it was weird that women were wanting to work on a ship. There was one stewardess by the name of Violet Jessup. She actually struggled to get a job on a ship because they told her she was too pretty to work on board.
Really?
So on her final interview, she wore someone else's clothing that was about 3 sizes too big on her. She didn't do her hair that morning, and she didn't wear makeup so they could see any fine line that was on her face.
Okay.
And then they hired her.
How interesting. It's kind of the opposite now, right?
Now we're like, I need to make sure I look
Yeah.
as best as I can right now.
Exactly.
Now this is our Father Browne gallery. All the photos that you see in this room, they were taken by one man, and that's Father Browne himself. He was a young Jesuit priest on board Titanic. His uncle had actually bought him a ticket and a brand new camera as a graduation present. Now he was actually only on board for 24 hours. He's what we would call a channel hopper.
Okay.
He was on board from Southampton, England to Queenstown, Ireland, and he got off and continued his own vacation.
Okay.
When he got off Titanic, he really didn't think much about it. He was on the most luxurious ship of the world, but then he heard it sank. So he went out and developed all of his photos and went around the world for a little over a year, sharing his photos and telling his story about being on Titanic. When White Star Line heard about this, they actually sent Father Browne a cease and desist letter. Every time he talked about Titanic and any time he showed these photos, he was putting the families of the victims and the survivors back to where they were the night it had happened, or the night they found out their family did not make it.
Okay.
He agreed, closing up his photo album and never touching it again. On September 1st, 1985, Dr. Robert Ballard and his team discovered the wreck of the Titanic 2.5 miles below the sea level on their very last day of their expedition. That very same year, Father Browne's photo album was discovered in a church attic in Ireland.
Wow.
So these two very important pieces of history came together on the very same day.
Wow.
Well, very same year, rather. Now, he took about 180 photos when he was on board those 24 hours. This is only half of them.
Okay.
And the reason his collection is so important is because these are the only photos ever taken on board Titanic with passengers at sea.
Wow.
White Star Line was going to wait till they reached New York City to take photos of the ship because they were afraid people would confuse her with her sister ship Olympic because they had taken her photos in Southampton. But of course, since they never got to New York, that didn't happen.
Right.
This is actually the little cease and desist letter they sent him. Now, he did take two
Interesting.
very important photos. He actually took the only photo of Captain Smith ever taken on board the ship.
Okay.
And he took the only photo of a child ever playing on board the ship. That's Master Robert Douglas Spedden. He was 6 years old when he was on board. And Father Browne captured just a fun moment of him playing with a spinning top and his father watching on. There's another little Easter egg in the film because James Cameron took this photo and added it into the film.
Really?
So when Jack sneaks up to first class to find Rose, he walks behind a father and his son and steals a jacket off the deck chair right behind them.
I think I'm remembering this now that you're saying it. Wow.
So
I'll have to go back and watch
it's
it.
a little fun Easter egg because you can now watch it back and go, that's Robert Douglas Spedden,
Yep.
6 years old aboard Titanic.
So is the picture of the captain the one up front
it
that
is
he took?
not.
Okay, what's the picture?
So the only photo of the captain ever taken aboard Titanic, many people think it's this photo. It's not. It's actually a very funny photo
Okay.
because all Father Browne was doing was he put his camera over the side of the ship and he was taking a photo up at the lifeboats, and Captain Smith poked his head out just the right time out of the bridge.
Wow.
And it's the only photo ever taken of him on board the ship. This is a fun one to try and send people on a hunt for because they always like it's that one. I'm like, no, it's not that one.
Yeah.
A photo of some of the crew trying on the life belts for a life belt inspection. Quite different to what they are today, huh?
Did anyone survive who was in the water?
Yes. 12 people that were pulled out of the water, 6 of them would survive.
Okay.
One of them, actually we have a photo of him upstairs. I can tell you about him when we're up there. So a little display about him. but one of them was a third class woman by the name of Rhoda Abbott. She actually did not want to get into a lifeboat. It's a very sad story. Her oldest son, Rossmore, had his birthday on board the ship, and that's when he got his first pair of long pants, which would make him a man, and so they wouldn't let him on board a lifeboat. And her youngest boy, who was still a child, refused to get into a lifeboat if his brother wasn't going to join them. So they had all basically decided that they were going to go down together.
Right.
She got separated from the two of them when the boats officially sank, and someone actually pulled her out of the water, and she ended up surviving. But it's very interesting with her case because she was close by to when one of the boilers exploded. So not only did she have frostbite, but she was also suffering burns because of the boiler exploded, so all this hot water rushing in the air. So she was treated for both frostbite and burns.
Wow. And lost her son.
And lost both her kids. Now this is third class. Hello, baby sailing. These hallways are actually built to the size of what they would have been on board Titanic. There were 709 people in third class.
Wow.
So could you imagine how cramped it could be down there?
Sure.
Now, not only was third class home to 709 people, but it's actually where the dog kennels were located on board the ship. We had 10 dogs on board Titanic. Out of those 10 dogs, 3 would survive. It was a Pekingese and 2 Pomeranians, so some tiny dogs. A lot of them were actually kept in the coat pockets of their owners, so that's how they got into a lifeboat with their owners that no one saw. They had these giant dogs, tiny dogs in their coat pockets.
Were there any cats on board?
It's not been confirmed. There's a story that there was a cat on board for a very short time. The story goes that this cat actually gave birth on Titanic, and then when they got to, I think it was Queenstown, she carried her kittens off.
Okay.
So it's not ever been confirmed. It's a very interesting one to be like, yes, but maybe no?
Yeah.
Maybe yes, maybe no.
Gotcha.
So we do have a little bit of some elements for the children who come on board the ship with us. They can answer some questions to see if they can test their knowledge about Titanic. And of course with our dog kennel, they can meet Madame Frou Frou, one of our favorite dogs.
Come on, Mike.
You want to check out Madame Frou Frou for us? Now over here, this is the actual size of what a third class cabin would have looked like on board Titanic. Pretty tiny beds.
Yes.
In 1912, the average height of a man was about 5'5". Average height of a woman was 5'2".
So people have gotten taller.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
This cabin is what we say belongs to the Frederick Goodwin family, the Goodwins. There was 9 of them, so they paid $35 9 times for each bed they needed. But more than likely, they probably only paid $8 because Sidney could probably share a bed with his mom because he was 1. Now, in today's money, a third class ticket would cost closer to $1,600.
Okay.
So third class was a very, very pricey ticket even then.
Yes. How much was first class?
I'll tell you that upstairs.
Okay.
Well, you see our first class room.
Okay.
Because they had 3 different ticket prices.
Okay.
Of course, we have our grand staircase.
It's beautiful for Christmas, especially.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we have put up our Christmas decorations for the year. Now, while Titanic never sailed at Christmas because she did sail in April, we wanted to give her the Christmas she never got to have.
Right.
We know exactly how she would have been decorated though, because we actually based this off of photos from her twin sister ship.
Okay.
So this is exactly how the Olympic was actually decorated for Christmas during the season.
It's beautiful.
Now, believe it or not, us using electric Christmas lights is still technically historically accurate.
Okay.
Because Christmas lights were invented in 1880. Now, this room is built to the size and scale of what it looked like on board the ship. We had the honor of using some of the same blueprints. So everything from the pillars, the back wall, the floor, to the skylight, and the entire rotunda are all built to scale. Now, the wood is oak, walnut, and mahogany with a light honey stain. And like I said earlier, every single design would have been entirely hand carved.
Wow.
Now above us, that's our beautiful milk glass skylight. This allowed natural sunlight to come streaming through it in the morning, and at nighttime it was actually backlit by electric lights.
Okay.
So when passengers were walking down, they still had almost what was like daylight shining down upon them.
We ran into Mr. Lowell, who he himself has been to the ocean floor to visit the Titanic, and he often through the years has visited the Titanic Museum to share of his expedition.
So you've been down to see the Titanic
Yes.
wreckage. Can you tell us all about that?
Well, it's hard to tell all about, though I had plenty of time. I was down there for 7 hours.
Wow.
It takes 2.5 hours to get down 2.5 miles to
Wow.
the wreck site.
Wow.
They turned off all the lights to conserve the batteries. Now I'm alone with my own thoughts in total darkness. When we arrived, they turned on the lights, and moments later, I was right over the bow.
Wow.
The same spot where Jack in the movie held out his arms and said, "I'm the king of the world." I went right over that side.
Wow.
I said, "Take me to the captain's cabin." I heard the side was already gone. They took me there. I was 5 feet from the captain's bathtub for 10 minutes while they were changing film.
Wow.
My job was to pick up artifacts.
Okay.
I found a wrench down there. The mouth on it was this big, sticking straight up in the ocean floor like someone had thrown a javelin. Found many items of value. We brought them all back, and I stayed focused on picking up artifacts, not emotionally get involved, but after an hour and a half, you see all the debris scattered on the ocean floor. You see a shoe over here and a hat over there, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. All I could think of was what took place that April night. 1,500 souls slipped into eternity that quick.
Wow.
All of them had plans to get to New York, start a new life. It never happened. Life can be short.
Yes.
Make sure you tell your loved ones every day how much you love them. Now, before I went down to my dive, they said, if you can find a first-class window down there, pick it up. We don't have one. We don't want any more portholes. We got enough of those. And I found one.
Fantastic.
We brought it up, and they took it out of the basket, and when they did, it bumped the basket. And little pieces of rust from the metal frame of the window fell into the basket. And I said to the crew, "Excuse me, what do you do with all that stuff in the basket there?" "Oh, we dump it overboard." I said, "No, don't do that. That's part of the Titanic." I reached in and I picked up a whole bunch of those pieces, and I put them in plastic so they don't get destroyed, and I gave them to friends of mine. Unfortunately, this is the last piece I got.
Wow.
Now, I put it in plastic. You might look at it and say, it looks like a little piece of rust. And you'll be right, that's what it is, piece of rust. But it's more than that.
Yes.
This is a piece of the real ship.
That's amazing.
Titanic. Come over here, lad. So stand right here. Turn around and get a picture of this. Hold your hand out.
You're holding
Now,
a piece of the
look
Titanic,
right into that
my
lens
gosh.
and smile big. Let them see your teeth. You are now holding a piece of the real Titanic in your hand at this moment. Do you realize how rare that is? How few people have ever done that or ever will? That's worth thousands of dollars to a collector.
Wow.
I wouldn't sell it. It's illegal.
That's amazing.
I'm not giving it to you either. Just letting you hold it for a little bit. Now you're going to go to school and tell your classmates you held a piece of the Titanic, and they're going to say, "No, you never did. Here's my telephone number. You have to call me and I'll verify you actually did."
He was great to interact with. You'll actually see him later in this video share a story of what it was like on the deck of the Titanic the night it sank. But let's get back to the tour.
The rosettes along the stairwell are all covered in 24-karat gold leafing. The same on our torch held by our bronze cherub statue. The chandeliers are all Austrian crystal cut chandeliers, and these features would spiral down an additional 4 decks from here. Now, while all of this had a very pretty price tag to it, the most expensive and most impressive part of the entire grand staircase was the floor.
Okay.
In 1912, they called this the millionaire's floor. Only the richest of the rich were actually able to afford it. Today, we have thrown that name away and we just call it linoleum.
Wow.
It was a pretty brand new invention still. The marble design on it took 2 weeks just to cure by itself.
Okay.
And unlike linoleum today where you can just roll it out and be done with it, each
Right.
tile had to be placed hand by hand.
Okay.
So it was a very long, tiring process for them to even put down. Ended up costing more than granite or marble to have put into your house.
Wow. How things have changed.
How things have changed.
Yeah.
It's also very fun when I have to tell people too. They go, okay, so what do third class people have in their houses? I said hardwood. And they're like,
Really?
what? I'm like, yeah, that was the poor person's floor.
Wow.
Because they just used the floor that was built with the house, hardwood.
Right. Wow.
And now everyone wants hardwood flooring. They're like $3,000 for one room.
Exactly. Wow.
Now this is
How
the fun part. We're actually
interesting.
one of the only museums to allow our guests to walk up the grand staircase.
Okay.
So you get to see what it felt like to be on board the grand staircase.
Wow.
This is a first class parlor suite. There were 34 of these on board Titanic. Quite a change from third class.
Yes.
Now what these rooms would have, you'd have this private sitting room, and attached with an adjoining door would be your bedroom. For a parlor suite like this, the tickets usually ran about $3,000 in 1912. Or $95,000 today.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Now for Charlotte Cardeza though, she had the money to spend, so she got a millionaire suite.
Okay.
There were only 2 of these on board the ship, one on either side.
Okay.
It had 2 bedrooms, a private sitting room just like this, a private bathroom, because even in first class they shared bathrooms.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
And then a private promenade deck, or what we would think of as a balcony today.
Okay.
In 1912, that ticket went for $3,300. You would be paying $125,000 today for the millionaire suite.
Wow.
Now, at Charlotte Cardeza, too, you might be looking back if you watch the movie again, where they put Rose and Cal is a millionaire suite.
Okay.
So Rose would have had your room on board.
Okay. So, how long, if the ship had made it all the way, how long was the trip?
It was only a week-long voyage, 7
A week
days.
long. Okay. All right. That's
'Cause
an
they had
expensive
already-
week.
They had only been sailing for 5 days when they hit the Titanic, and it was estimated it'd only take them 2 more days to reach New York.
Wow.
Now, this room is actually rented out in the style of the room that was rented out by Isidore and Ida Strauss. They were co-owners of Macy's department store. On that back little cabinet back there, we have a photo of Isidore and Ida. The bust in the middle, that is a bust that stood in Macy's department store after the wreck of Titanic. It's of Ida. Now, they were traveling on board, going back to America after spending a vacation on the French Riviera.
Okay.
When on the night of sinking, Isidore led Ida and her personal maid, Miss Ellen Bird, to lifeboat number 8, assisted them into the lifeboat, and stepped back. The officer in charge of filling that lifeboat turned to Isidore, basically explained to him that he didn't think anyone would object if he wanted to take a seat next to his wife. He looked around, he saw that there were women and children still on board the ship. He saw there were men younger than him still on board. He didn't want any special treatment, so he refused to take a seat. When Ida learned that her husband would not be joining her, she took off her long fur black coat, handed it to her personal maid, Miss Ellen, and said, "I won't be needing this where I'm going," and got out of the lifeboat to rejoin her husband. When there were only 2 lifeboats left on board, Isidore was begging her to take a seat in one. She finally just turned to him and said, "We have lived together many years. Where you go, I go. I will not be separated from my husband. As we have lived, so we shall die together."
Wow.
They were last seen holding hands on the boat deck when the water washed them away. Ida's body, if recovered, was never identified. Isidore's body was recovered and identified and buried in New York. And we're very honored because we actually have an artifact that has only ever been on display here. It's this one right here. This is Isidore's pocket watch fob. It was connected to his pocket watch and it was covered off his body. This is the first time in 110 years that the family's ever given it up.
Wow.
It's been in the family ever since. It was his great-great-grandson that brought it in for us.
Wow.
If you open it up, it has a photo of his oldest daughter and oldest son in it when they were children. Now, the reason that there's only a little bit of Christmas in here is actually because Isidore and Ida were Jewish.
Okay.
So they probably wouldn't have decorated it so heavily for Christmas.
Sure. Great love story, though.
It's one of our favorites. One of the main inspirations for Jack and Rose, because where you go, I go. If you jump, I jump, is where they took it from.
Okay.
This is our first class hallway. This is what we kind of would consider a mirror maze for our museum,
Okay.
because we have to make sure no one turns that way.
Yes.
This just kind of show you how long the hallways would have been in first class.
Yep. Definitely has that feel of
Yes.
being on a ship.
That's also the room where a lot of people, we've actually had guests say that they feel like they are moving in that
Yes.
room because of it. And they're like, It's always very fun. Like, does anything move in the museum? I go, oh no, it's all very still. They go,
Yeah.
are you sure?
Yeah.
I'm like, it's still. It's just your brain messing with you, I promise.
Yes.
Now this is our music gallery. It's actually in the design of what the first class dining salon would have looked like on board.
Wow.
So this is where we honor the 8 musical heroes that were aboard Titanic. They either played as a trio or as a quintet. The only time they ever played as all 8 was the night of the sinking, when Wallace Hartley and the band decided to play music to help calm the passengers down. Now, towards the end of the night, Wallace turned to the other musicians and said, "It's been a pleasure to play with you all. You are dismissed," hoping that they would find safety in lifeboats of their own. Wallace stayed behind, re-shouldered his violin, and continued to play. One by one, the other musicians returned, picking up their own instruments and continuing to play with him. Now, the last song they ever played together was their Wallace's favorite hymn, "Nearer My God to Thee." Let's see if I can remember how to play it now.
Lovely. Thank you for playing that.
Thank you. That's the only song I
awesome.
know how to play. I taught it myself. Now, also in this room right now, because I've talked about the movie a lot, but this year's actually the 25th anniversary of the movie, coming up in December, because it was released December 12th, I believe, 1987. I make people feel old when I tell them I was only a year old when it came out.
Yes, you do make me feel
So I'm always like, I think it was December 12th. I don't remember. I watched it later on. But in honor of the 25th anniversary, we actually got some of the costumes back from the movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
So this is Rose's, what they call the sinking coat. It's a coat she had on while trying to rush on through. And of course, we had the corset that her mom was lacing her into and reminding her, we are broke, you need to marry Cal.
Right.
And then of course we have one of the Heart of the Oceans that was actually made for the movie.
Okay.
So that is not one of the instruments, that's with our new exhibit right now. So every year we switch out the exhibits. We try to honor a different group that was on board the ship. We have done entire exhibits on the 8 musicians, so we have things throughout out through the museum. We've had exhibits based on around the 10 dogs. We've had exhibits based around the 9 clergymen, and this year we are honoring the 69 known Jewish passengers and crew members that were aboard the ship. So this is actually a violin of hope. It's been brought in because we are trying to connect back with the Jewish passengers on board, because their story just didn't end when it came to Titanic. A lot of their lives went on longer and were affected by the Holocaust. And then we have our bridge. And then here's a little bit of a closer photo of Captain Smith taken on board as well.
Okay.
So it's blown up right there for everyone to see a little bit better.
Ah, there he is. Do you see him, Micah?
So this is our bridge. We call it a moment in time. The only thing that moves in this room is the helm. So this right here is the only thing that will move. The clock is stopped at 11:40. You cannot move the telephones. You cannot move the telegraphs right here. And you can't open up the compass right here either. But this is actually built to the exact same view as it would have been that night. So the view outside is what they would have seen. We actually had an astronomer come in and they helped pinpoint where every star was that night in the sky.
Wow. Micah, you want to steer the ship?
You gonna save us?
Turn!
Well, the good thing is you're moving the right way too. Good job, hard to starboard. So what ended up happening that night is that Frederick Fleet was up in the crow's nest. The easiest way to think about it is that he was looking out into the night sky. They did not have binoculars. Unfortunately, there was another officer by the name of David Blair. He was the first officer. He was bumped off and was replaced by a different crew member. And when he left the ship, he accidentally took the binocular keys with him to the room. And so they were looking up outside, and Frederick kind of just thought to himself how strange it was that all these stars were in the sky except for a giant black spot in the middle. And when he looked closer, that's when he realized it was an iceberg. He picked up the phone on the crow's nest, which made the phone on the bridge over here immediately ring. The officer on duty answered it, asked him, "What do you see?" He spoke his infamous words of "iceberg right ahead." It's 1912, they're very polite. So the officer replied back with "thank you" and hung up. He then walked on over to Robert Hitchens and he gave the order of hard to starboard. Gonna turn it again? Turn it again.
Starboard.
Starboard, go right.
Here,
Good.
I'll hold you. Okay. Come on, iceberg.
You're doing good. You're doing
Save
great.
us, Micah.
Now you turn, and unlike our helm, which will go around and around forever, Robert actually had to lace his arms in between and hold it so the water didn't try and push it back the other way.
Wow.
And all they could do was watch as the iceberg in front of them started to move slowly to the right. There was a shake, which would shake the helm, and in 2 hours and 40 minutes, this entire room would be under the water.
Wow.
That's just how quickly Titanic would have sank. You think you could have done it? No? We can test it out later. There's a little video game in a couple rooms ahead.
Ooh.
You
see.
You can dodge the iceberg.
I did it. I did it last time.
You did it last time?
We did it last time, yep.
Now this next room is very cold. It's always set anywhere between 48 to 52 degrees at all times.
Okay.
That's actually 20 degrees warmer than it was the night of the sinking. It was 32 degrees that night.
Wow.
But this is supposed to give you the feel of what it would have been. And then if you'd like, if you reach your hand over the deck there, you're allowed to touch 28 degrees salt water.
Whew.
Do you like
That's
it?
cold.
Refreshing?
You want to jump in? No.
Up to your neck, you know.
Ooh.
Now, a big question we also get is how people always ask us how it's not frozen, the water isn't.
Yes.
That's because salt water actually freezes at about -6 degrees.
Okay.
This is our movie gallery. It tells a little bit about the boilers, which we talked about downstairs.
The steam was piped to these reciprocating engines.
10 to 15 minutes of video is, and it just continues on a loop. And we do change it out during certain months. So during March, there's actually a different video in here. Now, this is our children's gallery. It's one of my favorite galleries in the entire museum. This is also where we have some of the photos and the names of the 69 Jewish passengers that were on board. So while we're celebrating the 69 Jewish passengers this year, next year, we're calling it the Year of the Children. We're celebrating the all 135 children that were on board. So we're gonna have a brand new exhibit laid out just around the kids.
So every year you do a new exhibit. Okay.
It's very nice.
Yeah. Keeps it fresh.
Keeps it fresh. You can
Yeah.
still kind of see the old things, but also something new. So you have William Carter, right? There's Master William Carter. So he was assigned Master William Carter, who was one of the richest little boys on board Titanic. And in our children's gallery here, he's actually able to see what William looked like when he was on board the ship.
We see the framing from the stern of the ship. From the
There you go.
Now, there were 7 children in first class. Out of those 7, 6 would survive. The only child to perish in first class is 2-year-old Lorraine Allison. Lorraine, her mother and her father, they were already asleep. Her baby brother Trevor was a very colicky baby, so his nursemaid Alice was trying to rock him back to sleep when she heard about the wreck. She tried to wake the family up. They were a little irritated that she was waking them up, so she wrapped Trevor up very warmly, got up to the boat deck and got into a lifeboat with him.
Okay.
When Lorraine, her mother Bess, and her father Hudson got up to the lifeboats, her mother was refusing to get into a lifeboat without knowing where her son was. So unfortunately, all 3 of them would go down with the ship. Trevor would be the only one to survive. He ended up being adopted by his father's brother.
Okay.
The staterooms are being
He was reunited with his father not too long after that in death. On his 18th birthday, he died of ptomaine poisoning, which is what we know as food poisoning today.
Wow.
So he's actually buried right next to his father because his father's body was recovered and buried in Canada.
Okay.
So they are right next to each other, the same plot. Now, second class, we had 27 children in second class. Out of those 27, 26 would survive.
Okay.
The only child to perish in second class is 14-year-old George Sweet. We do not know why he does not get into a lifeboat because he is a child. The only reasoning we can think of is that 2 days later would be his 15th birthday. He was born April 16th, and he would have been gifted his first pair of long pants. So we just kind of think he decided he was a man before he was a man.
So was 16 considered a man at that age?
15, 16, it really
Okay.
depended on what the family wanted to do.
Okay.
And he was actually traveling with his, I always say pseudo-adopted family. He was a ward to this family. He worked for them, but they still treated him like family.
Okay.
Because he was traveling with the Herman family. So the last that he was seen was by one of the Herman daughters. They said that him and their father led them to a lifeboat, helped them in, and then stepped back. And that was the last they'd ever saw of them. Now, third class, of course, is where it hits hardest. There was 97 kids in third class. About half of them do not make it.
Wow.
But one of the funniest stories in third class is of little Monsa Caroon. She was 4 years old, traveling with her father. They were on their way to Illinois. And her father actually was able to get both of them dressed through the chaos of the third class cabins up to the boat deck. And there he handed Monsa over to a woman in a lifeboat. When he tried to take a seat next to her, the officer in charge of it stopped him, said, "Sir, it's women and children first. You need to wait your turn." He tried to explain to the officer what was going on. If he did not get into this lifeboat, his daughter would be an orphan. The officer, however, was not going to let him through. Monsa wasn't really understanding what was happening. She didn't speak a lot of English. All she saw was this man holding her father back from joining her. So she did what any 4-year-old does best. She starts throwing a tantrum. She starts screaming and crying. And when that doesn't work, she bites the officer's arm that's holding her father back. Well, the officer immediately ripped his arm away from Monsa, looked at her father, Franz, and said, "Get into the lifeboat and keep control of her." So her tantrum ended up saving her father's life that night.
So there is good that comes from tantrums.
There's good that comes from tantrums. Or as I tell my field trip groups, I said that's the only time you're allowed to throw a tantrum is when your father or mother's life depends on it.
Exactly.
Now this is a very fun one for a lot of people. This is our interactive gallery.
Okay.
So if you'd like to test out your strength with the sloping decks, you can see if you could survive holding on to the degrees at which Titanic was sloping. Now I am going to let you know you are cheating just a little bit because you have rubber sole shoes, and no one on board Titanic had those except for one person because they were really, really expensive. So the grips you have on the bottom of your shoes, imagine if these weren't there. Imagine if you were just in your socks on that. That'd be slippery, right?
Yeah.
You're going to try the 30-degree angle? 30-degree slope, that's at 2:05 a.m. Is it getting a little harder? Yeah.
Even with your
grips?
shoes.
Now this is the hardest one. This is a 45-degree slope. Now think of it this way. You're about to get on this one. This is at 2:18 a.m. Titanic sank at 2:20.
Wow.
So this is 2 minutes before it sank. So when you're on this one, think that in 2 minutes it goes from 45 degrees to a 90-degree angle and then down. Whew. Try 45 degrees. Can you do it? You might just have a chance.
You might make it.
You might make it. You're doing great. Now you can also sit in a lifeboat. So this is the actual size of a Titanic lifeboat cut in half. And in here you can actually press the buttons and hear the stories of the passengers who survived in lifeboats. So if you push the button, it tells their story.
Lucille Carter has an interesting background if one is to believe the family story. I have been told I'm a descendant from a respected Tennessee family.
Now the real question is, do you want to try some Morse code? So over here, you can see if you can send out a distress signal.
Welcome to Titanic's Marconi rule. You are about to send a distress signal.
She did it.
Let's see if it can pronounce. It can't pronounce my name. If it can't pronounce your name, it just says operator. And if it can, it will actually say your name.
Operator, help is on the way.
Now here is another little prop from the movie. This is the violin that the actor playing Wallace Hartley played.
Okay.
It's actually signed by some of the cast members.
Yes.
And Miss Celine Dion herself signed it. And then we have one of their Oscars that they won for Best Costume Design, with some of the little details that came off her jumping dress. So you can enter into Titanic, that's what we call it, and see if you can dodge the iceberg.
Turn. You did it!
You did it!
You got your cardio workout there.
This is our newest in the interactive gallery. This is Dive to the Titanic. So they can do some little submersibles that you can kind of control, and you can explore some of the artifacts in the wreck site at the bottom of the ocean. So he is building the Titanic. It's a little magnetic puzzle game to see if any of the kids can actually put together what the Titanic would have looked like. Then we also have where you can test to see if you can tie some classic boating knots.
Okay.
I think the bowline's the easiest one.
Yeah. That's why I went for this one.
That was the easy. I think the sheet bin's not too hard either. So this is the memorial wall. This is where you can discover whether or not your passenger survived the sinking. It is in alphabetical order by last name, separated by class or by crew. So that'd be his father. So he's right next to him.
All right, let's see if Mom survived.
Charlotte Cardeza.
Charlotte Cardeza. I survived. You always die when we come here.
Every time I die.
And you
Let's
have
see, who we
Alfred
got?
Norney.
You survived.
The first time ever.
So now in the next room, you can actually find out what happened to your passenger after the sinking of Titanic, after what they did after surviving. But this is the world's largest Titanic Lego ship, 56,000 Lego bricks.
Wow.
Took him 11 months to build at 10 years old. He's on the autism spectrum.
Micah, 10-year-old, built this Lego ship. You need to get on it. How long did it take him to build? Do you know?
11 months. So there's a little show that happens.
So he didn't put the lights in there. They added that later?
Yes.
Okay.
So how we got it was that it was actually in a museum in Norway. Our owner was talking about wanting to put lights into it so we could kind of put it as a part of the show. Mm-hmm. The best part is that, of course, when we first got the ship, Lego was not making little Victorian people, little Edwardian people.
Right.
So he had put all his different own little Lego people on it, and we had Darth Vader at the helm. There's also another little tiny Easter egg on this Lego ship, because we have tiny little Jack and Rose at the bow
Oh, wow.
for their arms.
Yes.
The I'm flying.
I see her. You see that, right?
So you were married twice, 2 children, successful stockbroker, lived in Bryn Mawr, Pennsylvania. And we have Alfred Norney over here, married, 2 daughters, born in Cologne, Germany, 1920 to 1930, successful motorsport competitor, 1940s car salesman, died in Bad Honnef, Germany at 80.
He became a car salesman.
And you were a race car driver. You had quite the life. You also snuck your way into first class because you originally boarded as a second class passenger.
Mr. Lowell would also hang out in this room and share stories. I'll let you listen in with his amazing voice and amazing stories.
I've been down to the Titanic, by the way. Very few people have ever done that. Fewer than 200. I was the 109th person chosen to go down. I've written a book about my dive. It's here in the gift shop. If you want to know how and why they chose me to go down, it's all in this book. Now, throughout your voyage today, you've heard various passengers and crew stories. Well, I want to end your voyage today with a Christian story from one of the clergymen aboard the ship. His name was Reverend John Harper. He was a Baptist minister from Glasgow, Scotland, on his way to Chicago to preach at Moody Church. When the Titanic started to go down, Reverend Harper ran around the deck shouting, "Women and children and unsaved people, get aboard the lifeboats." Can you imagine that? This is a Baptist minister still preaching while the ship is going down. He even took off his life vest and gave it to a man that was not a Christian. Thought that'll give him time to get his soul ready for eternity. My, what a sacrifice. He knew he was going to die. His daughter Anna was standing right next to him, and his sister-in-law. The sister-in-law overheard the Reverend when he gave that life vest to that man. He said, "Here, take this. I don't need it. I'm not going down. I'm going up." Wow. Testimony of faith. Unbelievable. He's in the water now. 28 degrees. Will you put your hand in that water? Can you imagine your entire body in that? Feels like 1,000 knives stabbing him. And a man drifted by on a piece of wood. Reverend Harper shouted to the man, "Are you saved?" The man said no. Reverend Harper shouted, "Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved." The man drifted off into the dark, and later the current drew him back. And Reverend Harper again shouted to the man, "Are you saved yet?" And the man said, "I can't honestly say that I am." Reverend Harper's last words were, "Believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved." And with that, the Reverend slipped under the water and went to that frozen, watery grave. There were 12 people pulled from the water that night. 6 of them lived. That man was one of them. And that story was told a few weeks later in Hamilton, Ontario, by that same man who said, "I listened to Reverend Harper's last message and became a believer in Jesus Christ with 2 miles of water beneath me." That's a true story. And that's in this book right here, Diving into the Deep. This is the book about my dive. In fact, it's about my entire life, but I know you'll enjoy it in the gift shop. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Thank you, Captain.
Let's check out some of the items here in the gift store once you exit. All sorts of Titanic puzzles. Got some little stuffed animals. For $7.99, the kids can get a Titanic captain's hat here. For $24.99, you can get this battery-operated boat. They have a number of different block kits. I don't see officially Lego licensed, but similar to Lego, or this one for $260. Get yourself a big fancy Titanic that you can build. All sorts of different coffee mugs and teacups over here. Lots of different shot glasses. All sorts of hats that you can get here. They also have these hat and t-shirt combos for $19.99. It's only small and mediums. There's a couple of different shirts that you can get. I do like this one right here that says Great Smoky Mountains, Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Like the movie Titanic, you can get yourself a large heart necklace for $109, or this one says a deluxe one for $189, or you can get a smaller one down here for $59.99. Here's the perfect set of shirts for a couple. They are $20 each. You just need to make sure you actually stand in the correct positions or it won't make much sense. But yeah, great for an anniversary trip or a honeymoon if you're down here and you come to the museum. Pick up a pair of these shirts, $20 each. They do have copies of Lowell's book that we saw earlier here in the bookstore. I'll also put a link in the description of this video if you can't make it out here and you'd like to check out his book. Check out the link down in the description to our Amazon store where you can pick this up. They have a number of movies, including James Cameron's Titanic, as well as a number of different books and this Titanic-opoly for $29.99. If you love to collect pennies, you can get yourself a collectible coin album with a Titanic penny included. They also have these heart necklaces for $16.99, or if you're really thrifty and want to give someone special a heart, you can get a chocolate one for 39 cents on your way out. They do have some Christmas ornaments. This staircase bell is $22.99. Here in the gift shop, they do have some restrooms down here, as well as a place that you can purchase photos. So here is a fancy necklace. Maybe Miss Katie can explain this one for us.
So this was made specifically for the museum. This is our own Heart of the Ocean, worth $250,000. 24 karat white gold, and then 155 karat Swarovski sapphire, surrounded by 58 round diamonds.
Wow.
So this is our own Heart of the Ocean that was made specifically for the museum.
That's going to wrap up our tour inside the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. We hope you've enjoyed this extended version of the tour, but again, there's so many things that we still haven't been able to show you on this tour, and we highly recommend, if you're anywhere near Pigeon Forge, Tennessee, or their sister ship in Branson, Missouri, get some tickets, go inside. It's a fantastic museum. We highly recommend it. A big thank you to Katie and all the amazing Titanic crew helping us to share just a taste of what this museum has to offer. And thank you to Kyle Granger for sharing this footage of a recent memorial that the Titanic Museum did for the OceanGate Titan expedition. I'll let you listen in.
These 5 men who were lost to us were not something intangible and distant from us. They were Titaniacs in the truest sense. They were you and me. They loved the story of Titanic so much that they went on an adventure together to meet her face to face. An adventure that I know most of us here would choose in a heartbeat if given the opportunity. I know I would. Our prayers go out to the families and friends of these 5 men, and our hearts will be with them as they are part of our big Titanic family. It won't be today or tomorrow or even the next day, but someday I hope that they can find comfort in the fact that their loved ones have now been laid to rest alongside the 1,496 whose stories they'd hoped to get even closer to on their voyage. Stockton Rush, Paul-Henri Nargiolet, Hamish Harding, Suleiman and Shahzada Dawood. Each morning, we come aboard our ship and honor the memories of the 2,208 passengers and crew of the great ship Titanic. And this morning, we get to come together to add 5 more names to their ranks. May their stories live on in the hearts of those who had the privilege to know and love them.
Pigeon was a friend, was also the commander of our ocean dive in 1987. He led all the dives. He's done over 35 dives over the years, and a true Titanic fan. We will miss that.
Though you have made me see troubles, many and bitter, you will restore my life again. From the depths of the sea, you will again bring me up. You will increase my honor and comfort me once again. If you'll pray with me. Heavenly Father, we ask for comfort for the families and friends of the 5 men lost to us this week. Comfort that we know only you can give. We ask for strength and endurance to see them through the hardships they still have to face. And we ask for words and heart so that we may take our experience and use it to help those we encounter each day to connect to the stories we are tasked with safeguarding, so that they may never be forgotten, as these men will not soon be forgotten by those with whom they were loved. In your name we pray. Amen.
As a final goodbye, Titanic crew, salute. Titanic crew, you are dismissed.